Hello everyone, my name is Angela Manning and I will be giving this presentation to educate you all on the photographer Diane Arbus about her life and her work. Diane Numeroff was born in 1923 into a wealthy family living in New York City. She had two siblings who were both interested in the arts. Her older brother was an accomplished poet and English professor, while her younger sister became a sculptor and designer. Arbus's parents were not deeply involved in their children's lives. The family's wealth was able to have their children to be overseen by maids and governesses. Arbus attended the Ethical Cultural Fieldstone School where she met her high school sweetheart and husband, Alan Arbus, and married him at the age of 18, and later had a daughter together named Dune Arbus. The influencers of Arbus's photography. Diane Arbus became interested in photography in the 1940s, shortly after getting married to Alan. He gave her her first camera and became her first teacher. Shortly after, she attended photography classes taught by Bernice Abbott, and her interest pursued further when she viewed a photography gallery featuring the work by Matthew Brady, Timothy O'Sullivan, Paul Strand, Bill Brandt, and Eugene Ayot. Diane Arbus worked in advertisement and often had assignments of clothing fashion. While under her husband's business, Diane worked to take care of costume and makeup of her clients while Alan did the photographing. Those photographs were often published in fashion magazines like Harper's Bazaar and Vogue. Eventually, Diane Arbus was unhappy working with her husband and moved on to a workshop of Alexei Brodovich. In 1956, Lizette Model became a mentor to Diane Arbus. She encouraged Arbus to work independently after Arbus left the fashion industry to become a professional photographer. She taught Arbus, the more specific you are in a photograph, the more general it will be. Another influencer of Arbus's work is Marvin Israel. Being the second mentor of Arbus, he was able to introduce her to influential people. Eventually, in 1961, Arbus became the art director of Harper's Bazaar and started publishing her own photographs. Diane Arbus as a successful photographer. In 1963, Arbus was rewarded a Guggenheim Fellowship for a project on American rights, manners, and customs. The fellowship was renewed in 1966. Throughout the 1960s, her financial success came from working on commissions and taking on magazine assignments. In 1968, she would photograph with a documentary style of sharecroppers in poor rural areas in South Carolina. Arbus has photographed several celebrities as well during her career, such as Mae West, Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, Bernadette Scherf, and the CNN reporter Anderson Cooper when he was a baby. After a while, she was becoming more famous and her magazine assignments decreased. Other things Arbus did during her lifetime. She taught photography at a few schools and universities. She taught at the Parsons School of Design and the Cooper Union in New York City, as well as the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island. She was also the first ever photographer to be featured in the Artforum magazine. Her work was considered to be shifting the perception of photography and ushering its acceptance into the realm of serious art. Diane Arbus' choice in equipment. Nikon F camera with a 50mm 1.4 f-stop Nikkar S auto lens. Rolleiflex camera with a 55mm 4.0 f-stop lens. Mamiya C33 camera with an 80mm f-stop 2.8 lens. The Pentax 6x7 camera with a 105mm 2.4 f-stop super multi-coated Stumikar lens. Diane Arbus's work is considered to fall under the street and lifestyle photography. She went out of her way to find unusual faces, freaks, and those that were considered to be on the outskirts of society. It seems to be that she found her subjects in the streets of New York City, the subjects of homes, or Arbus would travel to New England states to find nudist camps and her other subjects. The choice in her subjects came from Arbus's deep fascination with freaks and their history. This led her to be known as the most controversial photographer of the 20th century because of her choice in subjects that she photographed. The first example was brought on after the rise of the disability rights movement in the United States and United Kingdom, while the second example was from the fact that drag shows were becoming more popular within the LGBTQ community. Here is one example of one of the many nudist families Diane photographed. She traveled to Pennsylvania to get this photo of them. Why these subjects in particular? As I mentioned before, Diane Arbus had a deep fascination with the people she photographed. She turned flaws into great photographs. She once wrote to a friend when she was trying to actively search for individuals institutionalized, "I would like to photograph mentally retarded people, idiots, imbeciles, and morons. Morons are the smartest of the three, especially the cheerful ones." She broke boundaries that were considered societal norms at the time, but she struggled with depression, being a good mother, and being a photographer. She put herself in danger in getting the image she wanted many times. As an artist competing with her male counterparts, she would do almost anything to get that image. She worked to normalize marginalized groups and highlight the importance of proper representation of all people. Here is a great example of her photograph, "A Jewish Giant at Home with His Parents in the Bronx, New York City, 1970. After her marriage ended with Alan, she became braver. She actually got closer physically to her subjects. All fear seemed to have evaporated. Here's another example of husband and wife in the woods at a nudist camp, New Jersey, 1963. She convinced her subjects to be invited into their homes, and she did this while also cruising around Times Square and the Bowery, and she was fearless trying to get that image. Here's a perfect example of this photograph titled "Russian Midget Friends in a Living Room on a 100th Street, New York City, 1963. The importance of her work. Arbus photographed her subjects with authenticity. She made her subjects be seen to the world for people who may have never encountered such people before. Diane Arbus quoted, "I really believe there are things nobody would see if I did not photograph them." Just like these two photographs here. Jack Dracula at a bar in New London, Connecticut, 1961. And to the right, female impersonator holding long gloves, Hampstead, New York, 1959. The importance of Arbus's work in regard to art history. Diane Arbus was featured in her first exhibit in 1967 with other photographers like Leanne Freelander and Gary Winograd at the Modern Museum of Modern Art. The exhibit gave credence to photography as an art for the first time in history. Here is a photograph titled "Identical Twins, Roselle, New Jersey, 1967. It is a photograph that looks uniform at a glance, but in reality there is differences with the fact that they are identical twins. As quoted from Jeff Rosenheim, a curator at London's Hayward Gallery showcasing Diane Arbus in the beginning, "The idea of working on the street and interacting with people, that direct one-on-one approach, was hugely influential from the day, but it's influenced photographers worldwide and influenced subjects to believe in themselves, so even people who are not image makers, but we are all image making when we perform our own lives. It is hugely influential in the film world, and a lot of filmmakers look to Arbus as a model of creativity and inspiration." Before her death, Arbus experienced several depressive episodes, just like her mother. The episodes may have been worsened by hepatitis. In 1968, Arbus wrote a letter to Carlotta Marshall, "I go up and down a lot, maybe because I've always been like that. Partly what happens, though, is I get filled with energy and joy, and I begin lots of things, or think about what I want to do, and get all breathless with excitement. And then quite suddenly, either through tiredness or disappointment or something more mysterious, the energy vanishes, leaving me harassed, swamped, distraught, frightened by the very things I thought I was so eager for. After her death, in 1971, Arbus committed suicide. A year after her death, the Museum of Modern Art featured another exhibit of Arbus's work. The exhibit brought in hundreds of people, and a monograph has since sold over 500,000 copies. Her work became recognized and loved by several photographers and art viewers around the world, such as this photograph, The Child with a Toy Hand Grenade in Central Park, New York City, 1962. For this photograph, in the contact sheet, Arbus took several photographs of this boy named Colin Wood, and Arbus ended up choosing the most expressive one. He is later quoted, "She catches me in a moment of exasperation. It is true, I was exasperated. My parents had divorced, and there was a general feeling of loneliness, a sense of being abandoned. I was just exploding. She saw that, and it's like commiseration. She captured the loneliness of everyone. It's all people who want to connect but don't know how. And I think that's how she felt about herself. She felt damaged, and she hoped that by wallowing in that feeling through photography, she could transcend herself." What art critics are saying. Susan Sontag once said, "The insistent sameness of Arbus's work, however far she ranges from her prototypical subjects, shows that her sensibility, armed with a camera, could insinuate anguish, kinkiness, mental illness with any subject." Two photographs are of crying babies. The babies look disturbed, crazy. Resembling or having something in common with someone else is a recurrent source of the ominous according to the characteristic norms of Arbus's dissociated way of seeing. Mary Warner was once also quoted, included with Freelander and Winograd in 1967 New Documents exhibition. Arbus's work was more personal, transforming the social world into a visual terrain to be mined for metaphors resonating with her inner feelings. Arbus turned normalcy on its head, making the ordinary bizarre and naturalizing the unusual. In her photographs of people, many of them made while she roamed the streets of New York, clothes and cosmetics are futile efforts to camouflage psychic emptiness or damage. When Arbus photographed children, she revealed them little versions of bad-tempered, mean-spirited adults. What more art critics are saying. Robert Hughes once said, "Arbus's work has had such an influence on other photographers that it's already hard to remember how original it was." What other photographers are saying. Some people like to think of Arbus as cynical. That is a total misconception. She was very emotionally open. She was very intense and direct, and people related to that. Edmund Shea. In conclusion, Diane Arbus lived from 1923 through 1971. She married young to Alan Arbus, who first influenced her photography. Then she met Lisette Model, who influenced her photography professionally. Then she was introduced to influential people through Marvin Israel. Arbus's success came from magazine assignments and photographing celebrities. She traveled to many places to get the photographs she wanted. In conclusion continued, Arbus was fascinated and empathized with the subject she photographed. She became known as one of the most controversial photographers of the 20th century. She worked to normalize marginalized groups and highlight the importance of proper representation of all people. She only saw her work featured once in an exhibit at the Modern Museum of Modern Art in 1967 before she passed. While her work was bizarre to many people, she is a renowned photographer and loved by many others.